Como sigo creyendo en ti, mar.
Good evening, everybody. It's so good, I say, to see everyone, even though I can't actually see anyone. But I know you're there, and I know we have a fabulous turnout for this evening's performance. For those of you who may not know me, I'm a longtime member of B'nai, but since moving to Boulder 20 years ago, I've been a little less active. But I have to say, I am absolutely delighted to have this opportunity to reconnect with our B'nai family and be able to help bring this evening of Motus Theater to our beloved community. I want to thank Becky, our ED extraordinaire. I want to thank Debbie Goodman, Ethan Waldman, of course, our readers, Hal and Carla, and to Rabbi Yvette for all you've done to bring this event to B'nai tonight. Now, I know that there are a number of us, a number of our members with us tonight who, like myself, have been supporters of Motus following their work since their founding in Boulder 10 years ago. And there's a reason that we have followed Motus Theater, and that is the power of the story. As you'll see tonight, Motus's founder and artistic director, Kirsten Wilson, has brought to local and national stages powerful, moving stories written and performed by our undocumented neighbors. Their voices transform our relationship to them. They reach deep into our common humanity. They change our hearts and minds. And perhaps most important, they move us to action. With our community's commitment to social justice, to Tikkun Olam, repair of the world, I cannot imagine anything more perfect than Motus joining us tonight. Just 10 days before we welcome Elijah to our Passover table, we welcome Motus with their program, We Were Strangers. And now back to you, Tanya.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited that y'all welcomed us into your space. Thank you so much to B'nai Havurah and all of our Undocumented and general operating funders just for their generous support of this program. And of course, thank you all for joining Motus Theater tonight. I know we're all gathering from the comfort of our homes, but today we want to honor that Motus Theater comes to you live from Colorado, which stands on the land of the Arapaho, the Cheyenne, and the Ute. I also want to acknowledge that we're all probably processing a lot of pain, anxiety, trauma, and emotions due to COVID-19, due to racism, ongoing challenges to democracy, and health and economic fears. So let's use this time to take 3 collective deep breaths while we reflect in our mind on something we're each grateful for. Ready? Inhale. Exhale. You're going to do 2 more. Last breath. Thank you. That's always really helpful to me to slow down as well. So thank you for doing that with me. My name is Tanya Titus. I am an undocumented immigrant. I am a monologuist in Motus's Undocumented series, and I'm the National Outreach and Education Director for Motus Theater, where we create original theater to facilitate dialogue on critical issues of our time. We use the power of art to build alliances across diverse segments of our community. And tonight, we're super excited to share with you stories from our Undocumented tour. This evening, we will be sharing 2 Undocumented monologues that will help us more deeply understand the impact of immigration policy and the lives of undocumented people so that we can reflect and take action. They were created in a Motus monologue workshop in collaboration with Motus's artistic director, Kirsten Wilson. One of Motus's strategies for the Undocumented tour to strengthen our community and our country is to present allied performances called Shoebox stories, where we ask people who are often in positions of public leadership in our communities and our country to stand in the shoes of an undocumented monologuist and read their story aloud. The readers don't need to agree with everything they read in the story. They just need to be willing to suspend judgment, model courageous empathy, and see the world for a moment through someone else's eyes. So for Motus's We Were Strangers series, we are asking Jewish leaders to read a Motus monologue. And tonight, you will hear Carla, Sciaky, and Aqua, the music director and the Shabbat musician at B'nai Havurah, model civic hospitality and deep listening by stepping into the shoes of Motus monologuist Alejandro Fuentes Mena and reading aloud his story. After the reading, they will reflect together with Alejandro on the impact of reading his story. And we will also have Motus monologuist Cristian Solano Cordova share his own story tonight. Before we begin, I would like to welcome Rabbi Yvette Lutman. Would you offer an opening teaching to prepare our hearts and minds to hold the intention of our time together?
I'd be happy to, thank you. In olden times, when the Torah was presented, it was read, and then there was someone called a meturgaman, someone whose job it was to translate the story into a language that people could understand. And stories make a list of facts come alive in the same way. It's so appropriate that this event is scheduled to fall right before Passover. And in the Passover story, we are directed to remember that we were strangers once. In fact, the commandment is every person has to see himself, chayav lirot et atzmo, must see himself, ke'ilu, as if hu yatsa mitzrayim, he or she removed themselves, exited from Mitzrayim, from the narrow place. And this storytelling is critical. It's critical to our culture and our history. And listening to the story is critical. So today, the fact that our readers will make these stories come alive, it's just perfect. It's perfect, and I'm grateful because I too would like to experience, to come to a greater understanding, as I hope we all will, of what it is like to be in that person's shoes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. And for those of you listening, what is one word you want to echo from Rabbi Lutman's teaching? You can go ahead and type it into the chat. Again, the question is, what is one word you want to echo from Rabbi Lutman's teaching? And I see empathy, alive. I remember the word understanding, story, gratitude, Mitzrayim. All of those are very strong words that I think will hold the intention of our time together today. And as you keep thinking of more, feel free to share them in the chat to keep us all grounded for today's event. I see lots of story and strangers. Thank you all. Now I want to welcome Teresita Lozano, who specializes both in sacred music and border music and comes from a Mexican crypto-Jewish background. She will start by singing Motus's theme song from Shoebox Stories that honors our time together today.
If you could just for a moment take a walk in my shoes, feel the weight of my burden, see the world as I do. Maybe then we'll find a way to live a life where each can say, I respect who you are. So take a moment to refrain from all the judgment and the pain and hold my story for a while. Si puedes por un momento caminar mi camino, sentir el peso de mi carga y ver el mundo como yo. Así vamos a encontrar la manera de hablar y decir respeto. Toma un momento sin rencor, sin todo el juicio y el dolor. Ten mi historia por un tiempo. If you could just for a moment let me walk in your shoes, feel the weight of your burden, live the life that you do. Neighbor, then I'll understand, despite our difference, shake your hand, and I'll respect who you are. I take this moment to refrain from any judgment and my pain, and hold your story for a while. If you could just for a moment take a walk in my shoes.
Thank you so much, Teresita. And now I want to welcome Motus monologist Cristian Solano Cordova.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me tonight. Such a pleasure to be here with you. I would like to dedicate my performance to my ancestors that have been through so many things, and yet, you know, the fact that I'm here is proof that they've overcome. So without any further ado, this is my autobiographical monologue entitled The Meaning of Courage. When I was my baby sister's age, just 12 years old this year, I didn't have many worries. And it's funny because my baby sister, the Nai, she's an American citizen, so it should be easier for her. But it's not. It's not right now because the people she loves the most, my mom, our other sister Bebe, and I, we're all undocumented. And when we're threatened, she's threatened. So my baby sister is forced to bear the burdens of attacks on immigrants, both under this administration and the Trump administration. I remember election night 2016. My mom and I were in complete shock, trying to absorb what had just happened to the country, trying to strategize about how to handle certain possibilities. I remember frantically Googling, what happens to a US citizen child if an undocumented parent is deported? My dad died young, so I needed to assure myself that if my mom was deported, I could get custody of the Nai, who at the time was only 8. But then, of course, what would happen if both Beba and I were deported? My mom and I totally lost track of time in our election night panic. So when hours later I came downstairs, I was surprised to find my baby sister, the Nai, wide awake, sitting in a corner by herself, crying, red-faced with puffy eyes. With my dad gone, I've always had to be the big brother, or rather father figure, since her mom was always working. I helped the Nai with her homework. We read each other bedtime stories, play games. I try to answer those unanswerable kinds of kid questions and comfort her when she's scared. But I wasn't used to trying to comfort her when, in reality, I needed so much comforting myself. I just remember tilting her chin, glistening with streams of tears toward me, looking into those deep brown eyes and trying my best to give her soothing answers to difficult questions, just repeating over and over, don't cry. Baby, don't cry. It's gonna be okay, I promise. It's gonna be okay. Listen, why would you be deported? Do you even know what that word means? You shouldn't have to. Now listen to me. You are an American citizen and you will never be deported. And you're right, I'm not a citizen, but I've got DACA. They can't deport me. And I know mom doesn't, but mom's gonna be okay. She's lived here for decades. She's not going anywhere. Baby, don't cry. Please. I promise. Whatever happens, we'll be together. Always. I'll be there to put band-aids on your scraped knees. I'll be there to help you with your school projects. Yes, we're going to finish reading Harry Potter together. And I'll be by your side when you need help applying for college. I'll be there for you when you fall in love for your first time, when your heart is broken. And I'll walk you down the aisle one day. And it really doesn't matter where, as long as we're together. And yes, of course, the puppy's coming with us if we go. Lulu's part of this family too, I'll have you know. Yeah, that's the dimply smile I like to see. It's gonna be okay. At least that's what I told her. I did my best to offer her what I wanted to hear, what I wanted to believe, both for her and our entire family. Because how do you talk to a child about being taken away from their parent or siblings without terrorizing them, without stripping them of their innocence? And with each day of the Trump administration, the increased deportations of parents like my mom, the attempts to end the DACA program that protected me and my sister Beba, the willingness to end rules that limit how long children can be detained, and even threats to strip children like the Nai of their citizenship. With all these mounting threats, it felt increasingly cruel for me to offer my baby sister what amounts to be a fairy tale, when in reality, she needed great strength to overcome great threats. So tonight, I offer you another story that I shared with her. And this story didn't kiss it and make it all better, but I'm hoping it'll help us stay strong regardless of any challenges that we might face. I was just 3 years old, and my sister Beba was just 1 when we crossed the border with her mom. We walked together with a group of people, maybe 10, 15, across the desert. We walked for hours and hours at night. I remember we were out in the middle of nowhere, following a dim silver light in the distance. I imagined we followed it because it meant we were going the right way, some shining city in the distance. And we finally got to a raised road lined with street lamps. And to avoid walking over the road and potentially being seen at night, we crossed through a drainage tunnel under the road. Mom had me walk through the tunnel in front of her, and she crawled behind with my sister in her shawl. And Beba and I, we were wearing those little kids' light-up shoes that everybody was going crazy over that year. And Mom had saved up a lot of money to buy them for us because we were going to be seeing our dad after a year of him being in the US on his own. And she wanted us to look our best. And those shoes, they were actually super helpful in that drainage tunnel to light the way for Mom and all the other people crawling through on their hands and knees. But of course, in the dead of night, in the middle of the desert, they were a dead giveaway. And we were finally able to see the moonlight at the end of the tunnel and catch a whiff of fresh air. But the coyotes urgently requested that my mom take off my shoes. "There's a border patrol car parked outside," he whispered. The drainage tunnel emptied out right next to a gas station where the border patrol car was parked. The officers were inside, we assumed, so we waited for a while, hoping they would return to their car and drive away. But nobody was coming out. And for some reason, the coyotes grew impatient and abruptly told everybody to move. And in the chaos, everybody immediately scrambled, crawling behind tall grass on their hands and knees as the coyotes gave us voiceless commands with their fingers on their lips and pointing to the ground. But the ground was covered in cactus thorns and pricklies, and I didn't have any shoes. And while everybody else crawled, my mom stood up, carrying both Beba and I in her arms, and she just started walking. And at first, I thought she was giving up because we'd surely be seen. I mean, everybody else was still on the ground, crawling on their hands and knees. But she stood up tall and walked with a defiant pepper in her step, as if she belonged right there where she stood. And that's when I realized she hadn't given up. She just had faith that walking quickly and quietly was her best strategy to protect us. She was resolved that somehow, somewhere, we'd be okay, and that we'd find a home where our family could thrive. And I've never forgotten the look on my mom's face as she walked out into the darkness of an unknown country. That is when I first learned that the real meaning of courage is not to pretend to be immune from fear, but rather to calmly and steadily take action in spite of it. And our former president and his followers might caricature my little 3-year-old self as a diseased toddler criminal murder gang rapist in the making. They might try to scare people who don't know any undocumented immigrants into thinking that a mother carrying her children to safety is nothing less than an invasion. But Bebe and I, we grew up beloved by our friends and neighbors, and we're strong members of our communities. We both went to college, and I even became student body president of my university. I'm not part of some invading army fighting against America, but like many of you, I'm fighting for the American ideals I know we can live up to. And they may want to take away my baby sister's right to citizenship, but I remain hopeful that maybe B'nai or some other young lady in this audience tonight might be our future president and help lead us to a future where we live up to our ideals to truly have liberty and justice for all. But that reality, it's going to take a lot of hard work, and not just on my part and not just on behalf of the immigrant community, but hard work on your part too. Every single one of you. As Anne Frank once wrote in her famous diary, how wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Cristian. And now Teresita will sing her musical response to Cristian's story. Please go ahead and share just a few thoughts in the Zoom chat or in the Facebook Live comments about what most impacted you as you heard Cristian's story. And sorry, we're not on Facebook Live, but that was in there. But please share what most impacted you about Cristian's story. Here's Teresita singing a musical response in the Judeo-Spanish language of Ladino.
Thank you so much, Tanya. So the song that I'm about to sing is a Sephardic melody called Durme, and Durme in Ladino means to sleep. And you are asking your son, your daughter, to sleep without anxiety, without pain, while you yourself, as a parent, know very much the dangers of what is happening around you. Perhaps you and your family are in danger, but you do not want to make that known to your children as they sleep. You want them to have hope that there will be peace, hope that they can be free from danger and free from pain. So here is Durme in the language of Ladino. Durme, durme, hermosa doncella, durme, durme, sin ansia, sin dolor. Durme, durme, sin ansia, sin dolor. Durme, durme, hermoso hijico. Durme, durme, sin ansia, sin dolor. Durme, durme, sin ansia, sin dolor. Durme, durme, hermosos mis hijos. Durme, durme, sin ansia, sin dolor. Durme, durme, sin ansia, sin dolor.
Thank you so much, Teresita. And now I want to welcome our second monologuist, Motus monologist Alejandro Fuentes Mena, who will introduce his readers today.
Hello, everybody. Before I pass on my monologue, I essentially wanted to just thank both Carol and Hal for being willing to listen to my story earlier on and now read it themselves. It's important words to me, and it's a piece of my narrative that I hope they take fully into their hearts and are able to share with all of you. And now, Carla, Sciaky, and Hal Aqua will be reading aloud my autobiographical monologue entitled Deport Me.
Just to say that it's a pleasure and an honor to be asked to do this reading and to share this place with Hal. And as we're both sitting here without hiding behind an instrument tonight.
Yeah, it's great to see so many familiar faces here. Rabbi Yvette reminded us that the timing of this program is it's right before Passover, and the message of Passover is welcome the stranger, because we were strangers. And I can't think of anything more courageous than Alejandro sharing his story with two complete strangers and gifting that to us. So we'll try to hold that gently. And now, Alejandro Fuentes Mena's autobiographical monologue entitled Deport Me. I was just a kid when I realized what being undocumented meant. At age 8, I started going to work with my dad so I could help him rebuild the entire outside of other people's homes, all the while not having a real home of our own. I'd help my dad research what to charge and work out all the math. For example, I'd discover that for one given job, contractors would charge $20,000. But my dad had been screwed over so many times that he'd only charge $15,000. Clients would see his strength in Spanish, his lack of English, and documented status, and give him about $10,000. And that is who my father believed he was. Half the man I thought he was, half the value of any other.
I witnessed as my mother would leave for an entire weekend, 72 hours, to take care of someone else's family. She was lured with the promise of being paid over $300 for the weekend, but she would come back with only $100 in her pocket. $100 that she saw as a blessing, $100 that I saw as an attack on our family. All those rich families saw little value in everything my mom did. They would take her away only to use her and spit her out. The money they paid was barely enough for food on the table. It didn't cover the worry my mom had because she couldn't be home to take care of us when we were sick, help us with homework, comfort us when we returned to an empty house. $100 for a whole weekend away from her family, like she was worthless. But don't you understand? She was priceless to me.
Well, spending my weekends without my mom as she cared for other people's children, and spending those weekends working for my dad for free so he wouldn't lose money for the privilege of building a home for someone else's family. And witnessing this over and over and over again, I began to think that I wasn't worth much either. Despite the fact that I had been recognized at school as gifted and talented, despite the fact that I was a math whiz and learned English, completely unknown language, in less than a year, and that I was an engaged student, despite the fact that I was a precocious worship leader at my church, I let those weekends of feeling worthless affect me. I began making jokes rather than making plans for my future, playing games rather than paying attention, chasing girls rather than chasing my dreams. And like all self-fulfilling prophecies, I got to the point where my grades reflected what society said my parents and I were worth: half-priced human beings.
But luckily, I had a teacher named Ms. Kovacic who worked hard to remind me of my value and helped convince me that what this society was telling me and my family was wrong. With her support and that of many others, I got myself out of that pit of self-deprecation, past the insecurities, past the hate, past the negativity, past that half version of me, into a good college and into a position where I am now an educator who teaches math. And like my mentors, I teach young children their value, because all children are valuable, just as you and I are valuable. As a teacher, I can't help myself. Let me take you to school for a few moments. Hope you're good with that. Let's start off with a little math lesson.
My father is one man, one of the hardest workers I know. My mother is one woman, one of the strongest and most compassionate individuals in my life. My sister is one daughter, a brat, but a lovable one, and an American citizen. And I'm one son, half of this country and half of Chile. And we are four whole, beautiful gifts, indivisible with liberty and justice for all, not the half-priced individuals that society has attempted to make us.
Moving to applied math and economics, if this country continues to deport the undocumented community, it is missing out on courageous, strong, intelligent, family-loving, hard-working people of great value. And that is not only our loss, it is your loss to miss out on us, not to mention the billions in taxes we bring in every year, which is billions more than large corporations are paying.
Lastly, moving beyond math to ethics, paying an undocumented person half the value for their life's work, extracting all you can get to build your homes and take care of your families, and then deporting them as if they had not brought value, is not just mathematically flawed, it's also an American math story problem gone wrong. It's criminal to treat us as subservient and less desirable.
I am living in this country undocumented, teaching your children, supporting them, engaging their minds in math and in their dreams. I'm 100% here and 100% committed to this country in which I was raised, this country that constantly seeks to spit me out.
Lose me, and you lose my value. Not just the money I pay in taxes and the money I pay into Social Security that I'll never benefit from, but you lose my ability to inspire, connect, and engage.
You lose my ability to bring an impact, and you lose the knowledge I bring to my students, who are your children. This country would be foolish to lose me.
Deport me. Deport me. But in the end, it's your loss. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Carla and Hal and Alejandro. And now Teresita will sing her musical response to Alejandro's story. As before, please go ahead and share a few thoughts in the Zoom chat about what most impacted you as you heard Carla and Hal read aloud Alejandro's story. Here's Teresita.
Oh, when the night has come and the land is dark y la luna es la luz que brilla ante mí. Miedo no tendré, oh, I won't, no me asustaré, just as long as you stand stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand junto a mí, junto a mí. Y aunque las montañas y el cielo caiga, no voy a preocuparme, porque sé que tú estás junto a mí. No lloraré, no lloraré, oh, I won't shed a tear, porque sé que tú estás junto a mí. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand junto a mí, junto a mí. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand junto a mí, junto a mí.
Thank you so much, Teresita. And now I would like to bring back our readers and ask a question. Carla and Hal, what most impacted you as you read Alejandro's story? And perhaps we can start with Carla.
Thank you, Tanya. For me, I was struck by the power on a lot of levels, the power of words. Alejandro taking these words and not only telling his story, but communicating so powerfully from the heart, and how we can share ourselves through our words, as Alejandro has. And also the power of a teacher who, or a significant adult who turns to a child and says, I believe in you. That's, to me, that was probably the most moving part, that there was a turning point for Alejandro as a person. And then the power of taking on that role yourself, Alejandro, and passing it forward to all these children in the face of the irony of the power of a government policy that does not serve all its people. So
Yeah, what Carla said, and I was so impressed the way your story honored your family, honored your roots, and honored your own strength, that you were just willing to stand up to injustice and have a strong voice. And I got to say, as a musician, I sing a lot of other people's songs, so I'm always, singing words that other people wrote. But there's kind of a filter there. There's kind of a remove, and I don't often get to meet those people. So there's something really raw and precious about being able to speak words written by somebody who I'm just encountering for the first time with a really powerful story to tell. So thank you.
Thank you both. And I'll ask the same question of Alejandro. Can you tell us what most impacted you about Carla and Hal reading aloud your story today?
I just appreciate the fact that Hal and Carla took my story and essentially, even though they haven't experienced the things that I've experienced, they attempted to empathize and sympathize with my narrative. Hal brings up this idea of how, as musicians, you often share other people's narratives through the means of their songs and don't always get to meet them. But I think when a story is powerful, when a story ends up impacting you and your life, whether or not you get to meet the individual, it doesn't necessarily change whether or not you are able to connect with it and B, willing to do something about it. And so I appreciated the fact that Carla and Hal treated my story with such tenderness, and then just always have this deep, deep hope that outside of the feeling, that it also enables individual like Hal, Carla, anybody who's listening to do more than just sympathize and empathize, but be willing to act in big or small ways. And that's the only reason why I'm willing to share it. That's the only reason why I'm willing to pass it on, because I want you to feel like I feel, or even if it is in a small way. And I know that they did today. So I really appreciated the sincerity with which you took my story.
Thank you all. And for just a moment, there's going to be a poll sort of popping up on your screen for those of you listening, asking the level of impact of hearing these stories. So just take a moment and respond. And in the meantime, I'll share that y'all highlighted some really powerful reactions to both stories in the chat. And for Cristian's story, I saw some appreciation of how he painted a beautiful picture of his mother's courage and his dedication to supporting his sister, and even how a prized possession like his light-up shoes can in turn put him in danger. And for Alejandro's story, I saw people highlighting phrases like lose me and you lose my value, and half-priced human beings, and believing it for a while, the fact that Alejandro really believed it and had to come out of it, that all life is precious and valuable. All of those are beautiful things for y'all to highlight in the chat as things that really came up in those stories. So thank you for doing that. We're actually going to move into a Q&A section where you can put in the chat or the Q&A feature your questions for Carla, for Hal, for Cristian, Alejandro, and myself. And I'll actually start us off with one question that perhaps Rabbi Yvette can pop in for. Rabbi Yvette, how do you hold Cristian's and Alejandro's stories and the challenges facing all undocumented immigrants in your role as a rabbi?
Such a small question.
I know.
I keep hearing two themes. One is the importance of never shaming someone in Judaism, and to fail to pay them what you have promised to pay them. She comes home, she's ashamed that she didn't get the whole $300. And the feeling of the child, am I not valued at least as much as $300? And the idea of the expression in Hebrew is zokef kefufim. We praise God for lifting up the fallen, and actually it means unfolding the folded over. And so who's folded over? People that are oppressed, people of whom economic disadvantage, economic oppression has been put upon them. It's a feeling of shame that I feel living in a society where I want the best for my buck. And there's a cost to that. There's a huge cost to that. If I'm to act, and I'm commanded as a Jew, attempt kedoshim tihiu, you shall be holy. But holiness means respecting everyone's life as everyone else's life. And when I take financial advantage, I'm not doing that. So that's one way I think that we can, as Jews, undo some of the damage.
Thank you so much for your reflections on what I know is definitely a very tough question. Thank you. I also know that many of you listening would probably want a lot more information, just facts about the immigration system and how you specifically can be an agent for change. So we did think that it would be important to share a link in the chat with some action items and facts about how immigrants are part of the solution against COVID-19. And so that'll pop into your chat soon so that you can take a look. But in the meantime, I would love to start answering any questions that y'all would have to the monologuists, to the readers, to myself. So I'll start seeing if those start popping up in the Q&A feature. But first, maybe we can start with both of our monologuists. I know that we often get a question of like, you know, what was this process of coming up with these stories and why are you still sharing them today? So if maybe you could start by sharing a little bit of that journey.
Interesting question. When I was first asked to do this, I was given several different stories. And so I got sort of a quadruple load of these stories all in one sitting. And that was a powerful experience, to use the word powerful. And of course, I didn't know exactly how this was all going to work. Becky had just approached me. So I'm just really impressed with the process and with the honoring.
Yeah, I'm also impressed with Motus Theater and how professional and deep you guys go. I guess I just kind of imagine something sort of a little bit casual with the way I do most Zoom things, you know, people show up, yeah, we'll kind of do some off the cuff stuff and we'll talk and we'll try to relate to each other. But the depth comes from your amount of love and caring and planning, and just really respect the heck out of this organization and people in it.
As far as the process that we underwent, we were together for like 4 months, crying together, loving on each other together, with all of these different prompts that Kirsten from Motus Theater had for us. And essentially, eventually picked one that we thought would be most impactful. Not only was it powerful for us, the whole process, but it was the thing that we thought would also help move the needle in terms of action versus inaction of those who don't necessarily share our backgrounds. And why do we keep sharing our stories? We keep sharing our stories because I think within the context of this, the more people know, the more supporters we have, not only for individuals who share stories like us, but if me or Tanya or Cristian were ever in deportation hearings, hopefully we would have, I don't know how many people are in this, like 64 more individuals who would be willing to go at bat for us and be willing to say, you know what, they deserve the ability to stay within this country that they've lived in for so long. They deserve the chance and opportunity to live their lives out. I'm looking at some of the questions that are here in the chat, and I want to answer just some of the simple ones. And Cristian, feel free to tag in with anything that you think I'm missing. But as far as how was I able to get a job as a math teacher, in 2012, Obama did this thing called DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And what it allowed was a work permit that would, it's not a pathway towards residency or citizenship, but it allowed you to get a Social Security that you could work from. And so we used that in order to enter many spheres that a lot of us had already thought or dreamed of doing. You know, like I never actually gave myself the opportunity to dream. I thought I was going to go back and work construction alongside my dad for the rest of my life and I was going to just see that mistreatment over and over again. But it was thanks to DACA that I was able to get it. But the thing that I want to accentuate with that is that it is not enough. We need a pathway towards residency or citizenship, and it needs to include the sacrifice. It needs to include our parents, because they were the ones who originally made the sacrifice that gave us the opportunity to live our lives out here. And can undocumented people get COVID shots? They can, but there is a lot of fear. And that's just the fact. A lot of people think that as soon as you start introducing this information and having to give too much of information of yourself, that puts them at danger. It's a real fear, but there's many community organizations that are essentially trying to like spin that narrative around and be all like, no, you should go take care of yourself, especially considering the fact that like it is undocumented people who are often the frontline workers in so many fields. And I'm gonna stop talking. Cristian, is there anything else that you would add to the things that are out on the questions?
Well, I guess I would just add that if you know any undocumented people and they're scared of going to get a vaccine, there's HIPAA laws, like health privacy laws, that prevent any healthcare organization from giving any information to ICE or like Immigration Customs Enforcement. And then secondly, USCIS and ICE has put out some guidance saying that they will not in any way, shape, or form ever go out and try to find people that go and get vaccines. And at the end of the day, it's viruses don't really care about your immigration status, and they're going to infect you regardless. And as a population, like, we need to make sure everybody gets access to this, especially those that are working in these fields where, like, my job, thankfully, I can work from home, and a lot of people can, but a lot of these essential jobs, they need to be done in person. And so, yeah, we do need to invest in getting out that message to the community a little bit better.
Thank you all for answering that, for sure. I think there's two questions earlier on that we could probably smush together. And they're also for Alejandro and Cristian. Question about how are you both feeling about the new administration and immigration reform? And perhaps tagged along with that, how are your families doing? Now that you've sort of helped everyone care a lot about your families, can you give us an update?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. Well, first of all, my family's doing fine. My mom's definitely, even though I know all about this, she's still afraid about going to go get a vaccine. So the struggle is real. But thankfully, I've been able to support my family during the pandemic when a lot of people were losing their jobs. My mom cleans houses, and that's definitely one of those that people just were like, stay away from my house. So that, she lost basically most of her income, and things are kind of coming back a little bit. But thankfully, thanks to DACA, I was able to work, pay for my education, and now, I have a stable job. So very, very thankful there. And it makes me think, like, I can only imagine, like, if everyone was able to like fulfill their potential, all of the benefits that we would have as a country. My mom has been wanting to become a nurse, or just, like a job that she can like feel fulfilled with, right? And that's something that she's never had the opportunity to get, and there's no end point in sight for her to be able to get any form of legal status. So that's definitely heartbreaking. And that leads me, I guess, to my reaction to the current administration. I mean, I work at a national immigrant rights organization. And I understand the slim majorities that exists in the Senate. But at the same time, I feel like, obviously, I know that Republicans are always going to be anti-immigrant, or at least in the short term, medium term. Can't tell the future, but I know that they're just very invested in that idea. But I feel like Democrats could be doing more to really sell the comprehensive immigration reform. And it seems they've kind of given up on Biden's like first immigration bill, because they don't think it has a chance at passing. There was a lot of talk within the immigrant rights movement about legislation being included in the COVID relief bill that would legalize essential workers that are undocumented and their families, potentially up to 5 million people. And they chose not to do it. And that was something they could have done. And that was literally probably the only vehicle to get any sort of legislation passed with such slim majorities. And they chose not to do it. And they told us that, they'd try in the next round of COVID relief, if there is any next round, right? So yeah, I'm disappointed personally. But that's what the struggle is for. That's why we are out here telling our stories. That's why we're trying to change hearts and minds. That's why we go and meet with legislators for them to understand these things. And that's why we ask each and every one of you to reach out to your legislators and request that they support our communities that have been, working in essential jobs. 5 million people that could have been legalized, that could have been on track to fulfill their potential in this country, and are still locked out. And not to mention the rest of us, right? That maybe slightly less essential, but we're all fully priced human beings, as Alejandro says. So, why shouldn't we all have the opportunity to thrive? So yeah, that's kind of my little spiel. Alejandro, you have anything to add?
I feel like you are an expert when it comes to immigration reform, so I won't add much there outside of my personal opinion being I wish I had more faith in politics, but I don't. For me, Trump represented the worst of the worst, and Biden is not who I would have chosen if I had the ability to vote in the primaries to be the candidate for the Democrat. But we're working with what we have, and I hope that people are able to put the necessary pressure on him so that he will continue advocating for the undocumented community, amongst other communities that need a lot of support right now. And as far as how my family is doing now, my mom just recently got her green card after literally being in this country for like close to 30 something years. And it literally took, if it was just up to them, it wouldn't have happened. It literally had to come from the sake that I am now in a place that I'm financially stable enough that I could pay all of the fees that were necessary to even get her through the process. And all she has is a green card, right? Like that's not necessarily a shoo-in for residency or citizenship, but it's a step forward that she didn't have before. And I'm really happy about that. But my father's immigration narrative is a little more complicated, and he's nowhere near that opportunity. And so policies that would support immigration reform, not only for the sake of me as the narrative of the child who came with no will of his own, but that support my parents and support the sacrifice that they were willing to make, that they were courageous enough, that they were brave enough to travel across fronteras, to travel across borders in order to make this opportunity happen. They deserve that opportunity. They deserve an opportunity to be known as a part of this country, despite the fact that this country consistently tries to spit them out. And I think too often people worry about the lawfulness of an action and completely forget that so many messed up injustices were at one point very lawful. And this is one of them. And I just hope that people realize that and are willing to step on the right side of history as we move forward in this country.
Thank you both for answering so many questions sort of put together. I know that was kind of a lot to share, so we appreciate you. I wanted to give the opportunity for Rabbi Yvette and Hal and Carla. Did sort of their conversation spark reflections on your end that you would want to share with everyone? No, that's okay. Everyone's sort of like, don't call on me. I also used to be an educator, so my wait time could have been longer, but I didn't want to wait just forever.
You were asking me, Hal and Carla?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. I think I'm just so frozen in shame. I can't get around that. The red, white, and blue flag. I used to feel so great about my United States passport, and I'm a citizen, and it, not that I'm not still proud to be that, but I think a lot of these things are done in my name with my tax money, and I don't feel good about that at all. I feel responsible. Yeah. I was looking at what you put in the chat for the action items. And I wonder if you could post that in the chat again so that people can click on it, and maybe we can just mull that around in our heads and think about what we possibly could do.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being vulnerable with us. Thank you. Hal and Carla, if you don't want to, if you don't have something to add, that's totally fine. I think for those of you listening, I think there was one question in there about organizations doing the work and maybe Motus Theater's relationship to them. And so I'll share with the audience that in addition to being an undocumented monologist and staff member at Motus, I do sit on the board of directors for the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition, which is sort of an umbrella organization for a lot of these other organizations that, Motus Theater is also a member of, and AFSC is a member of, and many, many more. And so if you're interested in looking more to a statewide level of other lists of organizations and places that you can get involved in, you can certainly look for the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. And then of course, Cristian, did you want to give a shout out to where you work?
Yeah, I also used to work at the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition, so lots of great memories there. I haven't done any court accompaniment, but I have worked with AFSC on other things, and they are great. And I will say before I talk about my current organization that there's kind of like different organizations that focus on a lot of different things that touch like the lives of immigrants in very different ways, right? So there's organizations like Motus that focus on culture. There's some that focus on like providing direct services. There's some that focus more on like protests and political advocacy, right? And there's a lot of faith organizations that are in the immigrant rights movement. So if you're interested, in getting more involved, AFSC is a religious organization. They're, Quaker, but there's also like an interfaith coalition, and they work on a lot of these things. So if you're interested, I'd look on Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition's website, and they have a lot of information there. And I currently work at the National Partnership for New Americans, and we work nationally. We represent basically 37 CIRCs in other states, 37 other immigrant rights coalitions in other states. And so basically we help fundraise a bunch of money to help fund all the legal services programs around the country. So we provide a lot of grant funding to organizations like CIRC that can then do DACA workshops, for example, or, help eligible legal permanent residents become citizens. Hopefully Alejandro's mom in 8 years, I think is the wait time. So yeah, we do that, and we do some legislative advocacy a lot around immigrant integration work. So we work a lot with refugees. We work with advocating for policies that basically help enable people thrive. One part of the conversation is to legalize the people that are here, that are contributing, culturally and socially and economically to our country. And then the other side of that, once we are able to legalize people, we need to make sure that, people have access to legal services to get everything done because it's so costly, right? We need to make sure people have access to workforce development programs so that they can like fulfill their best selves. English language programs, all kinds of really amazing programs that already are existing, but we want to make sure that there's enough funding to ensure that those people that once they get legalized, or even people that are able to become citizens now, can fulfill their full potential and just be their best self.
Thank you so much, Cristian. And I just wanted to say thank you all for your amazing questions, and of course to our panelists for your insights. You will now see another little pop-up poll on your screen, so just take a moment to answer that. And that's just about this Q&A section. And that'll take you about 5 seconds. So now I would like to move us closer to closing out today by asking B'nai Havurah's board chair, Ethan Waldman, to offer a final reflection, and then we'll be followed by a final song in Ladino from Teresita. So welcome, Ethan Waldman.
Thank you. As we were listening tonight, and as we are approaching the Passover holiday, my thoughts were to the subtitle of tonight's event, We Were Strangers. It's actually a very powerful statement. The power of it comes from a couple things. First of all, whether you know it or not, we mostly hear that statement in the context of Passover, and occasionally we hear it repeated throughout the year in the context of Jewish teachings. What you may not realize, by the way, is that it is actually a common phrase used in contemporary Hebrew dialogue in Israel. I worked for an Israeli company, and we would use that phrase in normal conversation as a way of reminding each other of the need for empathy and an understanding of other people's perspectives. It was actually just a normal common phrase. It's that powerfully infused into our culture to think about that phrase. But I was thinking about where that power actually comes from. And it seems to me that that it comes from two different places. First off, it's a statement of identity, not a statement of obligation. We usually think of it that way. It's remember this, be guided by this. It's more than that. It's a statement of identity. It's who we are. It's almost as if to say, if you cannot view things from the perspective of others, if you cannot remember your own past and apply your own past to the empathy you can express towards others, then are you really one of us? Are you really one of this people? Can you be? It's that powerful statement of identity. And yet, there's another power in that statement, which is, if that statement seems like it's something special and that's something special about us, there's a power in the fact that it's also an extremely universal expression. It can apply to everybody. It does apply to everybody. After all, everybody is or was a stranger somewhere or at some time. We're not special because of that. It is simply our obligation to remember it. It's an obligation that every one of us has. Every one of us has to share. And in the end of the day, it should be the driving force behind our thoughts and our actions. We can agree or disagree. We can debate policy, governmental decisions, the way the program should be, but everything should be done and informed from a place of empathy, a belief in the value of humaneness in the way we treat each other. Maybe we'll make the right decisions if we start from there, but the fundamental starting point has to be that we start from a place of empathy and a belief in the fundamental rights. I actually, Alejandro said something that I think was very powerful. Put aside the legal perspective of it and think just in terms of a moral obligation to do what you believe is the right thing. You can't be driven towards that without some sense of empathy. So I guess that makes this the perfect event to have right before our own Passover holiday. Perfect reminder to us. I do want to take a moment to thank Marjorie Goldman for sponsoring this event and bringing this amazing program to us. And of course, I want to thank everyone involved with Motus Theater for making us uncomfortable and moving us greatly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now here's Teresita.
So this particular song that I'm going to sing is called Cuando el Rey Nimrod, which is the story of the birth of Abraham, who of course is the first Jew, the first person to recognize the one God. And this is about the prophecy of his birth, and when King Nimrod found out about this, had ordered that any pregnant woman, as soon as she gave birth, if it was a male child, be killed. However, Abraham, of course, survives this, and it is a song of hope. It is a song of rebirth. In a sense, it is a song of life and a song of coming together as a united people under one God. So here is Cuando el Rey Nimrod. It's one of the more popular songs in Ladino that is sung across Sephardic and crypto-Judaic cultures. Cuando el rey Nimrod al campo salía, miraba en el cielo y en la estrella, vido de luz santa en la judería, que había de nacer Abraham Avinu. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. La mujer de Terra quedó preñada y día en día él le preguntaba: ¿de qué tenés la cara tan demudada? Ella ya sabía el bien que tenía. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. En aquella hora el nacido hablaba: andavos la mi madre de la miara, ángeles del cielo me acompañara, porque soy criado del Dios bendito. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Miradle mi madre, que el Dios es uno. Él crió los cielos uno por uno. Dicedle a Nimrod que perdió su tino, porque no quiere creer en el verdadero. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel.
Thank you, Teresita. And I would like to give an opportunity for Carla, Hal, and Alejandro do you have any last final words for each other before we end and you go off into your evening? And if so, please make them brief.
Just really quickly, one, I really appreciated everybody who took part of this event. And I really appreciate Rabbi Yvette's words about not only acknowledging the potential shame that can be felt when you hear a story like this, but moving it towards action and not getting stuck in the shame, because often our bodies will want to do that. Our bodies will just want to feel the shame and feel stuck and make it feel like there's nothing that can be done. But it is in those moments when you power through alongside the community that you seem to have a very strong community that actions actually work towards changing our future. So thank you.
I want to give another shout out to Teresita. You know, music is something that bonds us across cultures, and so happens that I really love Sephardi music. I know Carla does as well, and you know, Cuando Nimrod, it's a great song. It's something we can just get into without worrying about differences in our backgrounds and you know, politics or anything like that. It's just it's great to hear your music, lovely voice. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I echo what Hal just said, and my grandfather was a Sephardic Jew and spoke Ladino, so just to acknowledge that. And then I just want to thank Cristian and Alejandro for being willing to share your stories and for all that it took to put the story down on paper and bring it to us, because that's an experience all unto itself. And then, of course, Motus Theater for all that it took to put this together, and Marjorie. And I also just want to say that anything that any of us can do as individuals in how we treat each other and how we treat that stranger and how we treat that child, that part of your story, Alejandro, Ms. Kovacic, just that part just got me every time I read through, and what a difference that makes. And so may we all be that person for somebody in their life.
Thank you. Thank you all. And with that, I just want to say on behalf of Motus Theater, we want to again thank our readers, Carla, Hal, as well as Rabbi Yvette and Ethan Waldman from B'nai Havurah, our Motus monologuists, Cristian Solano Cordova and Alejandro Fuentes Mena, as well as Motus's powerful contributing artists, including artistic director Kirsten Wilson and singer Teresita Lozano. And again, thank you so much for welcoming us into your space today. This has been lovely. And if you're able, please consider becoming a supporter by donating to Motus Theater so we can continue our strategic work. We hope that you'll visit our website to find out how you can share these stories, as well as just a lot more information about Motus's Shoebox Stories podcasts with guest readers like journalist Jorge Ramos, who read Cristian's story, and humanitarian chef Jose Andres, who read Alejandro's story. You will all actually receive a follow-up email from B'nai Havurah with information about how to join our mailing list so that you can join us in future performances, as well as receive a link to today's performance in the hopes that you will share it with your friends and family and anyone who is absent from today. And you will also receive a survey link so you can share some feedback with Motus Theater. So that is it from us. Thank you so much. And I hope that you all have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Como sigo creyendo en ti, mar, tu horizonte no es tu